Let's Talk Nursing is brought to you by bjninform.com, a learning platform for bite-sized, evidence-based content that supports all aspects of nursing. My name is Caroline Vogt, and I'm editor of BJN Inform. In each episode, I talk with experts about different topics affecting nursing practice, including person-centered care, nurse well-being, and career development. In this episode, I am joined by Dr. Alison Gregory to discuss domestic abuse within the nursing workforce. We explore why nurses are at an increased risk, why this issue has often remained hidden, and the vital role colleagues can play in recognizing and responding to those experiencing abuse. This podcast recording took place on the 22nd of June 2026. Let's meet our guest.
So hello, I'm Dr. Alison Gregory, and for almost 20 years I've been a researcher in the field of domestic abuse. I'm also a counsellor in that field too. And my research has had a focus on the informal support that we can all provide to someone who's experiencing domestic abuse as friends, as family, as neighbours, as colleagues. But also more latterly, my research has concentrated on the domestic abuse experiences of people working in health and social care roles, in particular the nursing professions. And my current project, the NAMED study, which stands for Nursing and Midwifery Professionals' Experiences of Domestic Abuse, has been kindly funded by the Royal College of Nursing Foundation. And I do want to say at the outset of this podcast that we are talking about quite a difficult topic today. And if you're listening to the podcast, you may be surprised by some of the thoughts or feelings that you have whilst you listen, not least because domestic abuse is incredibly common, and it's very likely that there'll be some people listening who have been affected by violence and abuse themselves. And if that is part of your experience, we're really glad that you found your way to this resource. But do look after yourself as we're talking. Have a think about whether you're listening in a space that feels comfortable, that feels safe. And if you're finding the information triggering, do perhaps consider taking a pause or taking a break from listening.
Research suggests nurses are at an increased risk of experiencing domestic abuse. How significant is this issue within the nursing workforce?
Yes, you're completely right. The research so far suggests a high prevalence of domestic abuse experiences among all healthcare professionals, and the specific pieces of research with nurses, with midwives, echo that picture. And my colleague, Dr. Sandy Deanser, and I carried out a systematic literature review. We wanted to understand what research had already been done on this topic, and we pulled together all the available research from across the world. And when we combined the prevalences that were in those studies, it showed us that 42% of women and 15% of men working in health and social care roles experienced domestic abuse during their lifetime. And around 10% of nurses, doctors, allied health professionals had experienced domestic abuse in the past 12 months. So that's 10% of the health and social care workforce coming to work every day, caring for patients, caring for service users whilst experiencing abuse outside of work. So yes, it is a really significant issue.
Looking at those numbers, why or how do you think that domestic abuse among healthcare professionals has remained hidden or overlooked for so long?
We were really surprised when we started looking at this, just how resistant research funders and other academics and other senior healthcare professionals were about us researching this topic. It's almost like there was a sense of disbelief that this could be happening to people working in the health and social care workforce. And I think part of this is about how society perceives people in caring professions. They are seen as caring, compassionate, nurturing, altruistic people whose role is to offer support to others. So the idea that they are caring for other people from that position where they're experiencing harm themselves or that they might need support sits really quite uncomfortably with us. It's a sort of a societal thing. And it's also part of that wider societal struggle about understanding who domestic abuse happens to. We all like to think that it happens to this other group of people because it makes us feel somewhat safe living in the world. If it happens to people who aren't like me, then I am safe. But the problem with that is we don't notice it when it's happening to the people around us. And absolutely, domestic abuse can happen to anyone, including people in professional roles, in well-paid roles, people who are intelligent and articulate, and people who are in caring and compassionate roles. So I think part of the challenge is that we just, as a society, we just don't quite want to believe that it's happening to people who are caring for patients, caring for service users in that way.
Your research also highlights that many victim survivors first disclose abuse to someone they know rather than a professional service. Why are colleagues so important?
Yes, people are twice as likely to disclose their experiences or to talk about what's happening with a friend, a family member, a colleague, or a neighbour as they are to go to a professional. They're likely to go to the people around them, the people that care about them, the people that they trust. Where colleagues in particular come to the fore is the regular and ongoing contact they have with the person who's experiencing abuse. Abusers often try to isolate people from their friends and family members, but if the person is employed and is going into work, those colleagues are the people that they continue to see, that they continue to have perhaps daily contact with. And so, as a colleague, you may get more of a sense that something is wrong. The person may appear differently or behave differently than they have done in the past. So, you may get a sense that something's not quite okay. And also, victim survivors often describe their work as a safe space. It's not always a completely safe space, but a sort of safer space. It's usually a space where the abuser isn't, where the abuser doesn't necessarily know the other people in that arena, although that's not always the case. And a lot of our research participants over the years have told us that work gave them a period of at least partial respite from the abuse they were experiencing. But it also gave them that sense that here is somewhere where I can perform at my best, where I know what I'm doing, where my confidence and self-worth is intact. So even when the abuser is undermining their confidence or eroding their self-esteem outside of work, work becomes so important and colleagues become so important because this is a space that is different from perhaps what they're experiencing at home or within their family setting. So colleagues have a real opportunity here to offer support in a safer environment.
So, what difference can a supportive response from a colleague make to someone's well-being and help-seeking journey?
So we know that when people who are experiencing domestic abuse get a positive and caring response from those around them, that their outcomes are better, that actually the impacts on their long-term physical health and mental health from the abuse are lessened. So actually people do better physically and in terms of their mental health. We also know that people are safer if they've received positive informal support. And by what I mean by safer is they're more likely to end the abusive relationship. They're less likely to be in a future abusive relationship. We also know their quality of life is better and that they're more likely to reach out for professional support. So they might choose to make a disclosure to a colleague as in the first instance, but actually that may lead them then to get the specialist support they need, which may help them to be able to leave the relationship in a safe way. And if we think about work in particular, many of the nurses, midwives, and healthcare support workers who've taken part in our research indicated that they did try to reach out for support at work. And whilst the responses weren't always positive, actually, when they were positive, people felt more able to continue attending for work, to remain in their job and their profession when sadly other people perhaps had left the profession or left a role because they hadn't had that positive support. And they also felt supported to take actions or to make decisions to help themselves safer. So actually the support of a colleague can really make all the difference.
Thank you. What are some of the signs that a colleague may be experiencing domestic abuse?
So when someone we know is experiencing domestic abuse, we tend to notice three things. We may notice that they have some physical injuries or marks or unexplained kind of injuries. We may notice a change in the way that the victim survivor is behaving, and we may potentially notice an abuser's behavior. And I'll go through each of those a little bit in more detail. So, in terms of physical injuries, we may notice bruises or cuts or burn marks or other kind of injuries, and perhaps if we ask about them or if the person notices that we've seen them, they may give us an explanation that doesn't quite feel like it makes sense or doesn't ring true. We may also notice that the person is wearing clothing or wearing their hair in a way to cover marks from injuries. So, for example, today is a really warm day. If one of your colleagues came in wearing long sleeves, there may be a query in your mind about, are they covering something up on their arm? So we may notice those kind of things. We may also notice changes in the way the victim survivor is behaving. They may be quieter than usual, more withdrawn, or seem kind of nervous, anxious, depressed, or scared. They may start wearing different clothes or a different amount of makeup. They might change their regular activities, particularly seeing you might see less of them. So, if everybody's going out for a leaving do, for leaving drinks, that kind of thing, in the past they may have come, but actually they don't seem to be able to attend, or the person seems reluctant to attend, or they might cancel plans with you. They might make plans, but then cancel those. And you also might notice that they're receiving lots of messages and texts during the day at work. And also, they might seem quite annoyed by the fact that's happening, but they also may seem unable to actually stop responding to those. You may occasionally, as a colleague, see or kind of witness, I suppose, abusive behaviours. Or you might just feel really uncomfortable when you meet the person. If they come to pick your colleague up from work and you happen to encounter them, you may just have that gut reaction was, I'm just not very comfortable around this person. And some of the behaviours that an abuser uses can be very confusing. They may seem very attentive. They may always drop your colleague off at work and be there in the car park on the dot to pick them up. They might send them flowers at work. They may be very interested in their colleagues and send them lots of messages. But you can see how actually those behaviors that we might have considered kind of romantic and interested actually could be a sign of kind of stalking and jealousy and abuse.
Are there particular changes in behavior, attendance, confidence, or workplace interactions that should prompt concern?
Yeah, so if we're thinking about people kind of in their workplace specifically, you may find that they start arriving late for work or taking more time off. It may even be a pattern of time off, depending on how the abuse is happening. They may seem distracted and less able to concentrate at work, or they may make more mistakes than usual, kind of minor errors. The person may also have to leave very punctually at the end of the day. You get a sense that actually somebody is waiting to pick them up and they've got to leave on the dot. Or indeed, they may actually be spending more time at work and just seem really reluctant to go home. So those are the kind of very particular sort of workplace changes that you might notice.
Many people worry about saying the wrong thing. What would you say to colleagues who are nervous about raising concern?
Okay, so we've started to notice a colleague is not doing okay. We're concerned for them. So what tends to happen, and this is true for all of us, we panic. We go into overdrive. We kind of worry that we're going to get things wrong, that we're going to make things worse. Is it really, would we be interfering? Is it really our role to say something, do something? And actually, people do need something from us. Very few people, there's been research done, very few people are offended actually if somebody begins to ask them or begins to show their concern that something may be happening that's not okay. And it may not be domestic abuse, it might just be that they're not okay. What people need from us is very simple. We certainly don't need to be experts. We don't need to know all there is to know about domestic abuse. We don't need to know all the services that are out there, but actually a kind and compassionate response that shows that we are genuinely concerned about the person is important. So it's about trusting our gut reaction. If we think something's wrong, invariably something is. And again, it may not be domestic abuse, but if we're getting that sense, I'm not sure everything's okay with this person. So they want, when we've spoken to victim survivors, they want emotional support, they want practical help. So by emotional support, what I'm talking about is us listening to people, us being prepared to perhaps gently ask a question and us listening, believing them, not judging them or minimizing their experiences in any way. And it's easily done. Somebody comes to us and they say, oh, I've been arguing a lot with my partner. And our immediate reaction is, oh, we all argue from time to time. Oh, yeah, I've been all arguing with my partner this weekend too. And by doing that, somebody might be trying to tell us something much more important, but by kind of reacting in that way, we've kind of, firstly, we've normalized arguing, and yeah, arguing happens in every relationship, but we've kind of normalized what they're experiencing, and it may be a bit beyond what might be a healthy exchange of opinions or discussion. On a practical level, it simply means knowing on some level about some support that you could signpost someone to. So that would be about finding out what's available in your workplace and what's available locally and nationally in the specialist services around domestic abuse. I'm certainly not saying it's easy, but it's also really not complicated. It's really compassion, patience, and just being available for people. Those go a really long way.
So, how can someone who's hesitant actually start the compassionate conversation if they're worried about their colleague?
Yeah, how to begin is a challenge, isn't it? So first, think about where you're going to hold the conversation. Make sure that you're away from other people. Perhaps it's a quieter time in your shift, in your day, where you can give some time to the person and away from others so that you can kind of do that privately. And I do appreciate that actually the beginning question, the actually starting the conversation is the thing people feel most daunted by. Um, but actually, we can do this quite simply by asking a very general question, which gives people an opportunity to talk about what's happening, but doesn't sort of push them or force them to go down that route. And the key is to ask the questions gently and with a level of concern. So to begin with, it may be about asking the person a very general question. How are you? How are you doing? Is everything okay at home? Is everything okay outside of work? Then that gives the person, if they are experiencing domestic abuse, they can talk about that or they could talk about something else, but it means that they know you care. And even if they don't talk to you about it at that moment in time, they could come back and talk to you about it in future. We could also, another way to begin is to ask them gently about things perhaps you've noticed in their behaviour. If they are more withdrawn and coming to less social events, we haven't seen much of you recently. Is everything okay? You don't seem quite like yourself. Are you all right? They're very, they're questions that show care and concern, but without being too probing in the first instance. So they're kind of easily acceptable and people can kind of respond how they want. And also if you've directly witnessed any abusive behaviour, so for example, if somebody is getting that kind of constant barrage of text coming through, you could just gently ask the person, how does that feel for you receiving those throughout the day? Is that okay? So that they've got an opportunity kind of to talk around what you've noticed. And just to say that people rarely use terms like violence and abuse when they're talking about their own experiences. They're much more likely to say that they're experiencing difficulties in their relationship with a partner or with a family member. Or they'll mention that someone else's behavior or someone else's anger is an issue, or how someone else is making them feel, the kind of impacts that it's having on them. So instead of us talking in those terms, I mean, to go straight in with a question like, are you experiencing domestic abuse would be quite tough, particularly for someone who perhaps hasn't quite recognised or understood their own experiences in that way. So instead, what it can be helpful to do is to mirror the language that people use. So for example, if someone comes to us and they say, my partner's really angry all the time and I'm worried that he's going to hurt me, we use their words in our questions. Is your partner angry often? Has he ever hurt you before? Because in that way, the person feels that we understand better. So they understand our empathy for the situation. So it's a really easy tool just to help the person know that we've understood what they're saying, but without labeling it for them. And it's also important to say that if someone starts telling us what's happening, but then stops, that we respect that, because actually pushing someone to tell us more than they feel comfortable to will leave them feeling quite vulnerable and fragile, and are perhaps a bit overexposed about what they've told us, and then they're unlikely to come back to us in the future to seek further help.
Hmm. Are there any other common mistakes that people might make when someone discloses abuse?
Yeah, definitely. All of us, if somebody makes a disclosure to us, we're going to want to fix the situation. We're going to want to solve it and make it stop and make it go away. And we can't do that. Unfortunately, that's not within our gift to be able to do that. And the problem is, if we try to do it, if we try to take over, if we try to take control, if we try to make the decisions for the person who's experiencing abuse, that can feel quite similar to the abuser's behavior. They've experienced a lot of controlling behavior. So, however well-meaning it is for us to try to jump in and kind of be the superhero in the picture, actually, that's not what people need from us. They need to take their own time and to think about their own safety and to think about their own decision making. And the second kind of, I guess, set of mistakes that we all make is that even if we think we're quite good listeners, listening well when somebody is telling us about a really difficult experience like domestic abuse is hard to do. So these are the listening errors that all of us fall into from time to time. The first is to talk too much ourselves. It's an uncomfortable topic. The person starts telling us, then they pause, and so we fill the gap, we fill the silence. But actually, to listen well means to give that person space to actually talk through. And of course, it's okay for us to ask questions of clarification, but really, if we just keep interrupting them, then we're not giving them the opportunity to talk freely. The second is when we turn detective and we try to probe for all sorts of details. We really don't need to know a lot of information about what they're experiencing. And sometimes curiosity gets the better of us, or sometimes we kind of feel that in order to help, we need to know way more than we actually do. Again, this can lead to people feeling quite kind of vulnerable and exposed if they have shared more than later they think, oh, I really wish I hadn't said that. So it's to let the person go at their own pace and to kind of share what they feel comfortable to. Also, when it isn't our relationship and it's not our experience, often we fall into the trap of offering too many opinions or perhaps offering comparisons from our own relationship. And unless those are super relevant, that they're not particularly helpful. And finally, try to avoid any kind of judgment or blaming or criticism. You may not agree with the decisions the person is making, particularly if they are choosing to remain within the relationship at this period of time. That's going to sit uncomfortably with you. But actually, if you convey that information to the person, again, they're likely to shut down. They're less likely to come back to you in the future. So try to avoid conveying any of that that's kind of going on the inside of you.
One of the key messages from your latest article on BJN Inform is that people don't need a perfect response. They need kindness and care. What does a good response look like?
People want to know that we believe them and they want us to listen. They want to have our full attention. They want us to acknowledge their experiences. And as I've said, they want to know that we're not blaming or judging them. We don't need to have all the answers. We don't need to fix the situation. We can share what we do know and offer the kind of practical support. So if your trust or organization has policies around staff experiences of domestic abuse, directing people to those, giving people some time off for related appointments to speak to a specialist advocate or to speak to the police or a healthcare provider, support perhaps to remove contact details from organisational web pages if they're experiencing stalking or surveillance of some sort, signposting to specialist organisations who can help. So we don't need to be specialists. We kind of just need to know the routes to help for people. And I know that responding well isn't always the easiest thing to do, especially if you're surprised by the information that you're receiving. People may tell you something that's quite surprising or quite shocking. And you may well have strong thoughts or feelings about what the person is saying. Um, but we certainly don't need to remain silent. It's just about moving from what's going on the inside of us, what's being prompted in our own, thoughts and feelings and needs towards the other person, helping them to consider what they think, how they feel, what they need, what they want to do, prioritizing their thoughts and feelings during the conversation. So if we focus on the needs of the other person and respond with kindness, actually we'll be really helping them to talk about what's happening. And that breaks the silence, the stigma, the shame around domestic abuse, which is so, so helpful.
So that leads nicely onto how can colleagues listen in a way that helps someone feel believed, supported, and not judged?
People need to trust us. And that's about listening without our own agenda, without inserting our own opinions and experiences and focusing on their needs. You can actually let the person know that you believe them. That can be really powerful. If somebody's just told you part of their experience, you can say, I believe what you've just told me. I mean, that sounds quite basic, but actually, to hear somebody say out loud that they believe an experience that you're not sure that other people will believe can be incredibly powerful. Or you can respond with a comment, they've just told you something that's happened to them. That sounds really difficult. That sounds really hard. I'm so sorry that you've had that experience. It just helps them to they know that you've understood the impact of their experiences and that you care. So it's about sometimes the kind of forms of words that you use. It's about giving people your full attention. It's about helping them to trust you. Um, and in order to help them feel kind of supported, you can ask them, what support would you like from me? In what ways can I support you going forward? Is it helpful for us to talk again? Is it helpful for um, me to direct you towards the other support that's available? How would you like these kind of conversations to go? Is it okay if I check in with you in a month's time? Or, how it's giving back people the empowerment and the agency to make those choices and decisions about how they can be supported. Um, yeah.
What practical support or signposting can colleagues offer without taking control away from the person?
So there are loads of ways that we can support people practically, including in the workplace. And again, the key is to do this gently and without pressure. People will do it in their own time. They may, at this moment in time, only want to speak to you. They may not want to take further action, but letting them know tentatively and gently what's available. We could offer people information about the local and national helplines that are available. So that might be just kind of finding out what those are. And if you're really unsure what's available, if you go to knowmore.org, that lists the specialist organisations that are available across the world, actually. So you can click on the UK and it'll tell you the specialist services available. So it's a pretty good starting point. And the national organisations in the UK will be able to tell you about the local ones in your area. We could offer to sit with the person whilst they call a helpline. Doing that for the first time can be quite a scary experience. So actually having someone beside you whilst you call a helpline or whilst you look up information online can be really useful. We can also let people know what workplace policies and support is available within the organisation. You may have an employee assistance programme, you may have counselling support, you may have an IDVA, an independent domestic violence advocate. Hopefully you have got a workplace policy. Not all workplaces, we'll probably come on to that, not all workplaces have got them yet, but hopefully you have. We could also give people the names and contact details of perhaps the relevant people in our human resources department or in the security team if, keeping the person safe at work is a particular challenge. But as I've said, Caroline, it's about not making the decisions for that person. It's offering these that are things that are available. These are things that I can support you to access if you'd like. It's difficult. You will want to find the solutions. However, emotional support is the primary form of support that victim survivors want and need. And if your conversations with the person are positive, that can be very often the gateway to future support. So emotional support first, but yes, there's lots of things that you can also do practically to help.
You were talking about supportive workplaces. For those that don't have anything in place yet, what can healthcare organizations and nurse leaders do to create environments where staff feel like they are safe to seek help?
Okay, so where there aren't policies for staff, most trusts and organisations have got domestic abuse policies for patients and service users, but they don't necessarily have them for staff. There is actually a template that the NHS provides that gives you the kind of the nuts and bolts of what should be in a policy. So actually, I'd encourage all organisations and all senior healthcare staff to kind of push for that, to actually make sure that there's a policy and guidance in place about how to support employees who are experiencing domestic abuse. It shows that the organisation cares, that it doesn't just see its people as kind of commodities. It understands that these are, real living human beings who have a life outside of work, and is interested in supporting them in kind of all aspects of life. And having these policies and guidance in place kind of really demonstrates that if people are going to reach out for help, that their workplace is somewhere where they could potentially do that. And policies often include kind of practical provision, for example, flexible working opportunities to change work location, contact details. Periods of paid leave can be especially helpful for people. And the policies are also a really good place to kind of list the support organisations that people can go to so that people can lay their hands on those really easily. As I've said, there is an NHS template for policies, and some trusts and organisations have really kind of gone the extra mile to make explicit the kind of processes and support that victim survivors can expect from their workplaces. And this all ties in, without getting too technical, but to the statutory guidance that accompanies the Domestic Abuse Act of 21, which makes it clear that employers should consider the impact of domestic abuse on their employees as part of their duty of care. So the policies are really core and fundamental as the kind of structure. But around that, it's also about organisations making sure that their HR teams, their security teams, their occupational health teams, their line managers have received sufficient training. Again, not just about patients and service users. This is about ensuring that you know how to support a member of staff who is experiencing domestic abuse. And if people aren't sure where to start, I've helped to create a resource called Safe Spaces. It's a free training resource to help employers and individuals to create safe and supportive workplaces for employees impacted by domestic abuse. It's got some really fantastic dramas. It's really good at engaging people. You can either use it as a kind of a standalone training, or you can kind of just use parts of it and put them within existing training. And also as a handful of thinking about the practical things in the workplace, there are some really innovative stuff that's happening out there. So there are some innovative organisations who have started to introduce, a little bit like we've got mental health first aiders in workplaces. They've started to introduce trusted points of contact in workplaces, people with a little bit of extra training around domestic abuse who can respond with empathy and signpost employees on. So again, it's something that organisations and trusts could consider having. You don't need lots of them, but it's letting people know that you as an organisation care enough to have these people in place, and that they're the people that somebody could go to if they wanted to make a disclosure, perhaps, rather than feeling they've got to go to their line manager, which can be a challenge for people.
And what about long-term support? What can colleagues do to support in the long term, especially when someone may not be ready to take action immediately
Yeah.
or to leave the abuser?
It's rare for a victim survivor to have help, seek help once, end an abusive relationship, never experience any future abuse, and for the whole situation to be wrapped up really tidily. That is so rare. People take on average 6 or 7 attempts to leave an abusive relationship, and they may help seek on multiple occasions before they finally leave or end the relationship. And in fact, they may never end the relationship. They may also seek help from us once and never again. And this can be challenging because we feel invested in the situation. We want to see it resolved. You feel worried or uncomfortable about what's happening if we don't know the outcome. But, and this is back to the control and responsibility is not ours. We can only provide a positive response at the time. We need to follow the lead of the victim survivor who's been speaking to us, if they want to continue seeking our support, that's great. So this is about kind of patience and being prepared to kind of walk with someone alongside in this journey. And really, you have no idea how important that response may be at a later point in time. When we've been speaking to nurses, midwives, healthcare support workers who've experienced domestic abuse, and they've talked about some of the fantastic responses from colleagues, sometimes those were a number of months ago, in that there was a gap between they got a really good response and actually that was phenomenally helpful, but then it took them maybe 8 months to make the decision to end the relationship or to feel safe enough to end the relationship. It's really about leaving the channels of communication open. So, somebody's come to us, they've made a disclosure, we've talked with them about it, we've given them a great response at that moment in time. We've talked to them about what future support they might need. And we could say something like, if you ever want to talk to me about this again, I'd be really happy to listen. Or if you can think of some other way in which I can help, do let me know. So it's leaving that pathway open that the person could come back to you and say, actually, you said that 3 months ago. I think I'm ready to, find out what help is available now, that kind of thing. It's about patience, honestly.
Okay. If there is one message you'd like every nurse listening today to remember, what would it be?
Okay, this is a slightly combined message. Domestic abuse can happen to anyone. It could be the experience of one of your colleagues, and your support really could make all the difference. You really can be the support that someone else needs.
If you feel in any way unsettled, unhappy, or distressed after listening to this podcast, please consider talking to someone that you trust or reaching out to one of the specialist services. More information and links to specialist services and to the study can be found in the podcast description or visit knowmore.org. Thank you for listening to the BJN Inform podcast. And a special thank you to Alison for sharing her time and expertise with us. If you enjoyed this episode, you can subscribe to the BJN Inform podcast on your preferred streaming platform so you never miss an episode. You can also listen to the podcast and explore our latest clinical and best practice articles online at bjninform.com. Until next time.